have the privilege of introducing your second keynote speaker for today, Diana Courtesies. She serves as the Director of Global Workplace Initiatives for Disability In, and she's responsible for managing key relationships across the Inclusion Works program and helps to develop various communication and engagement strategies with various partners across the globe. She supports the CEO to CEO letter initiative with CEOs and organizations that are going all in with disability inclusion, such as Children's National, something we're very proud of. She earned her Master's of Business from the University of Houston and her Bachelor's of Fine Art from the University of Tulsa. She is extremely passionate advocate for disability inclusion in the workplace and in athletics. She's one of 2 chairs for Real Abilities Houston. She is a board member for USA Obstacle Course Racing. She's a Tough Mudder ambassador, and she's a Mind Over Matter alpha. In her spare time, she enjoys volunteering, public speaking, obstacle course racing, running, and traveling. I will also add that she loves doting on my nieces and nephews because she is my sister. And she is my inspiration. She's why I'm in pediatric healthcare, her and her sister. And it's a privilege and an honor to introduce you to Diana Courtesies. So thank you.
Hello. Okay, that's done. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be here. I have my phone up here just in case I forget my notes. There's lots of numbers, but I am so thrilled to be here back in person, right? To kind of keep with the tradition my older sister did, I'm going to do also a visual description of myself. And we at Disability and love doing this because it allows everybody to participate. You can keep it short and sweet. So Diana Courtesies, I go by she, hers. I'm a white female, short white female with brown hair, and I'm wearing a black dress. And again, we like to do that just to be inclusive of everybody. So I'm gonna try to stay on time, but we're gonna talk a little bit about disability etiquette because it's kind of the elephant in the room that we stopped talking about, and now we're talking about it again, right? And then we're going to talk about a little bit of that. Catherine talked about caregiving, right? So if you're not a disabled individual, you may be taking care of a disabled person or even an elderly. So really, let's talk about some of those accommodations, that flexible work and things like that. Okay, so I am going to, I think maybe do this right. Let's see. All right, perfect. So here, a little bit about Disability In. Children's National is a partner of Disability In, and we are global. I'm actually in Houston, Texas, so you will hear the you all come out in my voice, or y'all more likely. But we empower over 435 businesses globally. We have 25 different chapter affiliates within the US on the ground. So if we can't help, they can help locally. We really help empower businesses with disability inclusion. Because as we talk about sometime in our life, we will be disabled. It's whether temporary or permanent. So let's keep that in mind. And sorry, I keep going out of the window. So let me, so we really talk about it because it's important. Again, I was born with my disability, as you can see. I do have an apparent disability. It's dwarfism, and then my non-apparent disability. So many of us in this room may have invisible or non-apparent disabilities. So we really work with these corporations to invigorate and to really look at disability inclusion within our company. And then we look at the positive business outcomes. Working remote was huge in the disability community and was a really big positive because at home, my house is set up for me, right? So I was able to succeed and get my job done efficiently because I had the things I already needed. So a little stats. We have 60 million of us with a disability here in the US, between 1 to 4 to 5 people. So there's quite a few of us even in this room with a disability. Over 1.3 billion individuals global. This means that 75%, or many of us who may have a physical or non-apparent, a physical or apparent disability, many of us have a non-apparent. So 75% of disabilities are non-apparent. We can't see them. So again, very large statistics. So why we're talking about it. And again, this number will increase just because of the aging population. And then how is disability defined? And that's something that you can really also look at your organization within, and how do you define disability? But under the ADA, it's defined as a physical or mental impairment substantially limiting one or more activity. It can be having a history of a record, or even being regarded as having one. And these are all the different types of disabilities. There's so many more, but these give you an idea. When we talk about physical mobility, my dwarfism, right? We have blind, low vision, deaf, hearing loss, intellectual development, neurodiversity. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that recently, right? Especially with this younger age demographic coming in. Mental illness or mental health. Wow, we've all been through a lot, right? So that's one of my biggest things too I like to talk about, is that my non-apparent disability is generalized anxiety disorder. And I don't know about a lot of you, but I had a ton of fun during the pandemic, right? So we need to talk about this because it is a lot more common than we think it is. But how do we talk about this? Because for so long, we were like, we can't talk about it because you may insult someone. You may say the wrong thing. And guess what? You may, and that is okay. Because you know what? We're all learning. And if we don't learn and we don't take the time, then we will never be able to progress and go further. So language, that's important, right? So here's some proper and improper. Specifically proper, we have two types of languages. Person first, where I'm me. You don't see me for my dwarfism, but you see me as a person and as a human being. And not even necessarily a patient, but as a person. So that is person first language. And then we have identity first. And that is when a lot of individuals feel that their disability has defined or is defined. There's specifically two communities that do go by this, the autistic community or neurodiverse community, and then the deaf community. When in doubt, if you don't know, ask. It doesn't insult a person when you ask them, or listen. And then if you go back and want to go by the ADA, person first. Remember, we are human beings before our disability. And then some improper, outdated, handicap. Let's get rid of that word. Retarded. Disempowering, suffering from. I don't suffer from dwarfism. If anything, I use it to my advantage, right? So remember that, right? Confined to. And then ableist and euphemistic languages. These are also very important and kind of come up more and more nowadays. So ableist, this is when able-bodied individuals or people without disabilities use this language. And it's like using childlike language when talking to me, and becoming insulting and condescending. And then the last one we have on there is euphemistic language. Instead of using the word disabled, because we are trying to empower that word, it's physically challenged. You're trying to talk around the subject, right? So just some things to keep in mind. Common courtesy and best practices. Accommodations. When asking people what they need, you can send out a wide email and just, if you're having a company meeting, just say, hey, if anybody needs anything, just let me know. Because you never know. Captioning is big. We never know. Or even just that little introduction that Catherine and I did, those go a long way. Look at a physical location. Is it accessible? Are the restrooms accessible? Because a lot of times the physical area is, but maybe the restrooms aren't. So make sure anybody who has a disability is able to access the building and have the same experience, right? Equality. Avoid attaching labels. I try to not use the word normal or even crazy, because we're all unique. We're all different. As Catherine also mentioned, we are looking at customizing the experience per person, right? Because we're all different with or without a disability. Treat adults in a manner befitting adults. I may be only 4 or 5, but I'm an adult. So I'd like to be spoken to as an adult. So just keep that in mind. And then call a person by their first name. You don't have to be, oh, the little person over there or the dwarf over there. Well, my name happens to be Diana, and that's what I like to go by. And then some other ones. Greet a person with a disability the same way. You don't have to necessarily always bend down for a person in a wheelchair or with me. Just introduce yourself like you would anywhere else. Ask permission. For anybody who has a speech impediment, it's okay to ask them to repeat it. Or if it's easier, write it down. It's not insulting. Speak directly to persons with disabilities. Don't speak to my sister, speak to me. And then if somebody has a caregiver, speak to them, or even a sign language interpreter. Speak to that individual, because that's who you're having the conversation with, including your patients, right? Because that's the person you're helping. And then relax, make eye contact. If you say something wrong, it's okay. And then it's okay to use common expressions. Like I always, people are like, don't sell yourself short, whoop, and then they look at that. I'm like, it's okay, let's laugh about it. So it's okay to use those common expressions. Some other things. Don't assume people always need help. I ran a marathon, so I don't always need help, right? But I maybe look small, but ask before. We're especially after everything we've been through, we want to help each other, right? But just in case before you do, ask if they need help. And if somebody says yes, ask what you can help them with, because you never know, it may be different. Don't judge ability. We are the best judges of what we can and cannot do. Did it take me double time to run the marathon as it would y'all? Yeah, it did. But that's okay. I was able to judge me for me and do what I could do, because we never know. It may not look the same, and that's okay, because we can do a lot of the things that we've had to adapt to our entire lives. And then an accommodation request is not a complaint or a favor, i.e., I need a step stool, or I need to stand over here because you can't see me next to the podium, right? So remember, it's not a favor or a complaint. It helps us just succeed. And some other things. So we're going to go through a few different types of disabilities. Again, just as general, not too much in detail, but just some things to keep in mind. Developmental disabilities. Intellectual disabilities that have difficult learning simultaneously or quickly, and that's okay. So what can you do to help them? Break job tasks down. Instead of giving them an assignment completely, have them do part A first. Be very specific when we need part A. And then once part A is done, give them part B. It doesn't mean they can't do it. It just means, again, we're doing things differently from each other, right? And a lot of times this includes individuals with autism, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, and this is really what we're now calling neurodiversity in the workplace. And then remember, autism, they have strong verbal language skills. A lot of times they don't do that short, sweet, like, hey, how you doing? Get straight to the point. And then remember with ADHD, again, these are what we call disabilities that are invisible or non-apparent. It's real. It's not laziness. So just keep these things in mind. And a lot of times it takes getting to know your employees and making that safe, comfortable environment for them to self-ID. You can see my dwarfism, but you can't see my OCD or my anxiety disorder, right? But I need to do things to work my way and be more efficient. So I need to be comfortable with telling you that. Mobility disabilities, blind, low vision, or deaf or hearing. Now, if you know somebody in a wheelchair, don't push or touch their wheelchair. Ask them before, if you, let's see, they're trying to get through the doors here or any place, ask before you can help, because you could injure them. Or you could break the wheelchair, and think of it as an extension of who they are. It's how they get around. Person who is blind or low vision, always identify yourself when entering a conversation, right? And especially when you leave the conversation. You don't want somebody talking by themselves, do you? You don't want to talk by yourself. So make sure you let them know when you enter the conversation and exit. And then if you have to be a guide, let them know. Say, I'm here to help you. Again, asking or saying, hey, if you need help, let me know. And then a person who's deaf or hard of hearing. First off, because you're, let's say you don't know ASL or they don't have a sign language interpreter, don't walk away from the conversation with them. There's, text there, and texting was originally made for this community. So you can text, you can write down. A lot of these individuals also lip read, so make sure to keep everything away from your lips. But whatever you do, don't walk away from having a conversation. Again, really include everybody. And then mental illness. Ugh, this one's always a fun topic, right? It's real. It's part of the ADA. It is a disability. We've seen these numbers significantly increase over the last couple of years. It is the number one leading absenteeism in the workplace is mental health. So we do need to talk about it, even if we can't see it. So some things to keep in mind, in 2020, it passed all other physical diseases and disabilities. Treatment is effective 80% of the time, but only 33% of us get the help because of the stigma. Only 33. I've been in treatment and I love it. My therapy, amazing. But would I have told anybody years before? No. And I didn't actually come out with it until 3 years ago myself. But it's effective. So we really need to make it people feel safe. And remember that what I may be going through may not be what somebody else is going through. And what helps me may not help them. And so stop that stigma, be supportive. Remember, we may not be able to see it, but be supportive. Every person is unique, so varies need. Running became a huge outlet for me. And hence why I ran the marathon. But that became a huge outlet for my anxiety disorder because the pandemic was my biggest fear in life. And then I was handed, here's what to figure it out kind of thing, right? So let people figure it out. Treat each person as themselves and then be supportive and know that it takes time for people to come out, especially if they don't feel safe in that environment. So some strategies: communication and manage change. Keep those doors open. Talk about it. We've let everybody in our houses now that we're virtual, right? You always see my dogs somewhere in the background. So talk about that. Talk about things changing. Inclusive virtual meetings. You can put closed captions up. You can do that little thing as I just did, is that visual description. Even when you take turns speaking up, you could say your name. So little things like that really go a long way. Ergonomic workspace. I have a step stool and it's $10. And you know what? A lot of us think that accommodations are really expensive and it's $10 Rubbermaid. And you know what? I can do my job effectively. So keep that in mind and explore accommodations. Sometimes it takes time, especially if somebody's been recently diagnosed with autism or ADHD. It may take time to figure out what medications work, what system works. So realize that, explore those accommodations. And then our caregivers. I had two parents who were supportive. Catherine was very supportive of my twin and I. We went through many health issues through our lives, still do. And so we can't forget those caregivers because they have a full-time job at work and at home. So 1 of 6. So we talked about 1 of 4 people with a disability. Now 1 of 6 people are caring for somebody. So again, we have quite a few of us in this room, right? So in order to recruit and retain this talent, we really need to be understanding of what these people are going through and what they're balancing. And so we really need to keep that in mind. Employees have the opportunity to really address this looming issue as, again, this aging population increases. More of us will be taking care and will be caregivers. So we need to keep that in mind. Let's look at enhance our workplace loyalty, right? Catherine talked about the great resignation. How can we really enhance that? Look at the recruitment and retention of your talent. It's pretty expensive to replace people. So what can we do to retain those individuals? Boost productivity. You know, that remote work really helps that you talked about. That increased, I bet, productivity more than we probably know. And then increase in share prices helps the company out too, right? We want that. So just some more statistics. Nearly 66 million Americans care for an aging. That's more than disabled people in the US. So 58 million, we have 66 million. So if you're not with a disability, you're probably taking care of somebody, right? And then with approximately 66 of us who are caregivers are women. And as Catherine mentioned too, the pandemic had a huge impact on women in the workplace. 37% have a child or a grandchild under 18 living with them. So you have a full-time job. You're going home to take care of mom and dad. Oh, by the way, you also have to feed the kids and help them out and get them ready. And then 36% of family caregivers care for a parent. And 7 out of 10 caregivers care for a loved one over 50. So we got a lot going on, don't we? So a lot to balance. And then 14% of family caregivers, or about 16.8 million, care for a child with a disability. And my parents had 2 of us. So it's a lot going on. And then just the impact of it. 72% report not going to the doctor. So they're not even taking care of themselves. We need to take care of ourselves because, again, absenteeism for mental health, the number one reason. 73% caregivers say they have somebody at the age of 18 either working or have worked while providing care. So again, they have that double job, right? 66 have had to make some kind of adjustment to work life. And sometimes even though that means quitting their jobs fully to take care of whoever's at home. And again, with this great resignation, we want to keep those people and retain them. So working caregivers, the difficulty of balancing those roles. Props to you all too, because you have a lot going on and many of you, none of us know about. So the majority of family caregivers balance responsibilities with their job and career. We want to be able to give them a break, give them the flexibility that they need, again, to succeed and be able to really grow in their career, right? We don't want to make people choose, right? Especially if they're good people, we want to keep them. And sorry, there's so many statistics. I want to make sure I get it right when I'm reading them off. So 70% of worker caregivers admit they suffer work-related difficulties. 70%. It's more than half. And the common workplace challenges are the absenteeism. And then even you're present, but you're not really there, right? Or you're leaving work completely, or you're distracted because guess what? You got to go home, deal with A, B, and C, D, right? And then the effect of employees, the business impact. We always talk about also the impact of hiring people with disabilities. A lot of times, you hire people with disabilities, and we are some of the most, the employees that stay the longest, especially if you give us the accommodations that we need. And we want that to be the same for our caregivers, right? And really look at that ROI. So American businesses can lose up to $34 billion. $34 billion, not million, billion. Each year due to employees' needs to care for loved ones. 3 in 4 employers report caregivers being stressed at work. Again, we had the pandemic happen. The growth of employee caregiving has implications for organizations, especially if you're looking to hire and retain these individuals. And then working caregivers have often been overlooked because it's like, oh, they won't be able to concentrate at work, right? A lot of times we overlook. This trend represents one of the biggest workforce issues. We can't overlook these individuals. We can't overlook people with disabilities, right? So what's the benefit? Ooh, there we go. So again, some more numbers for you. I'll quickly go over these. So every dollar that represents invested in flexible work arrangements, that remote work, you get $2 to $4 back. Look at that ROI. Telecommunicating delivers a return of, again, $2 to $4. So again, a reason why to help it's not just the right thing to do, but it also helps the company. And then 10% reduction in the inclination to job changes, almost 2% in productivity. Numbers, statistics, we all like numbers, right? And this really tells us. And then just some more. Employees that find caregiving support benefits to be extremely valuable. We talk about this younger generation coming into the workplace, and they really want to see that, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, we also want to keep our current employees because they also have the responsibilities at home. So we really want to make that environment for both individuals, right? 91% said because they have an elder backup care benefit, that they continue their work and they stay there. So that help that we're giving them, the help that they may need. And then 95% said that employer-sponsored backup care would be an important consideration in deciding whether they're going to stay or go. But how do we support? Actions to support. Catherine talked about that culture. It is so important. It's so important, especially again with these younger generations coming in, wanting to self-ID and be proud. Why the rest of us generations are trying to, also do the same, whether we're a caregiver or a person with a disability. Culture is so important, especially again, after the 3 years of the pandemic, when I've let you in my house to see what's going on also behind the scenes. So we need to understand that too. Train managers. It's so important to train managers. Because a lot of times managers are the go-to people who these individuals go seek assistance from, accommodation from, a need, or they see what's going on with the person. They're not coming in, or they're more disheveled. We need to really, really train our managers and understand that these challenges, if we help them, people will be more productive. And sometimes we don't see that necessarily. And then support groups. We talk about support groups in mental health and even AA. Same here. Support groups are so important. And that can be led by experts. That can be led by your community peers, or even individuals in the same environment. We kind of talk about employee resource groups within corporate. This is similar to that. Have those support groups that people can relate to and lean on and learn techniques, right? And then develop a company-wide understanding. We may have the top leadership understanding, but what if we don't have the middle understanding leadership? Where does that go then, right? We need everybody to understand and be on the same page. So really communicate. Events and materials, increase awareness, talk about it. Kind of like disability. For so long, we just didn't talk about it, right? And now we're like, well, we're talking about it, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. So let's talk about it. Make people feel safe to talk about it. Really welcome. You may not be able to relate, but be empathetic. Again, empathy goes a really long way. These efforts can be really effective as senior leaders and managers express their support. Even when we talk about self-ID campaigns for people with disabilities, you really see that low percentage because, if I identify, what are you going to do, right? Really be able to have the managers, senior managers, everybody really showing that support. Encourage managers to dispel those myths that you hear. Oh, they're caregiving for somebody at home. That means they're distracted at work all the time. Dispel those myths. And the managers can work with employees to address those. Again, work with your employees. Sometimes it is just a basis of what you figure out what works best, individual basis, but really work with them. And then it makes people feel safe, whether you're identifying as a person with a disability or whether you're identifying yourself as a caregiver, or you could even be both. And then I'm sure many of you all probably even know this better than I do, but the Family and Medical Leave Act, understand the requirements of it, really learn about it. Organizations can use their health insurance provider, retirement plans to help really give up that backup care that we said. Offer advanced planning ahead of time. Really be aware and train managers about the legal obligations too. That's the other thing, we have, or legal obligations. Really talk about that because that could impact decision making. Develop, disseminate, and enforce a strong EEO policy. So just some things that you can do. And then what's the benefits? We always like talking about the benefits because there are. So ensure managers at all levels are aware, comply with the organization's work-life policies. And if we see anything too, work-life is becoming more and more important, right? We learned during the pandemic too, as Catherine said, what's important? What are my priorities in life? Provide incentives. Assess supervisors' willingness. Sometimes it takes time. And know that and be okay with that. Focus on the applications, qualifications, and this can go both with the disability and a caregiver, right? Focus on what they can do. Sometimes maybe they're not as great as interviewing, but wait a minute, they have all the other things that check off. Focus on what they can do, what their skill sets are, because again, all of us are very different. Do not ask questions about, if they do release that information that they're a family giver, or they do. Or I come in for an interview, right? Watch those personal questions that you ask. If a person wants to self-ID themselves as a disability, or if they have caregiving, then be very careful on the questions you ask. Focus again on, don't ask how much time it takes out of work, what's going on. Be very, very cautious of that. And then ensure flex options are available. Again, it really helps everybody in the workplace. And then I believe this is my last slide. So if overtime is required, many of us have been putting in overtime, especially since our laptops are, at our fingertips all the time, and somehow we can't get rid of them or walk away. So if that overtime is, required, make it as family friendly as possible. You know, can they answer that email when they get home, put the kids to bed or put their parents to bed, whatever it may be? Determine whether voluntary or mandatory. Is it really voluntary or mandatory? Really look at that. And if not, permit employees to schedule their overtime in advance, especially if there's a project ahead. You know, kind of sit down and think about how you can really work out their schedule. Provide support. Resources are always a plus, or referral services. And then such services may include, providing guidance and advice. And if you don't know, that's okay to tell them too. And you can say, hey, I don't know how to help you. I want to help you. We're going to figure this out, but I'm going to go to the people that I need to go. And that's okay to say too. A lot of times we feel like we have to have the answers right away, but we're all learning this. So, and if you don't, that's okay to say that. Say, we're going to work on this together. We're going to figure this out and we're going to get you the answers. And then resources here, if you want to take a look, this is all types of resources to what the COVID-19 pandemic has had on persons with disabilities, caregiving opportunities, and things like that. So I appreciate your time. I think I'm good with time. I was rushing to make sure I got it all in one time. But thank you all for allowing me to be here in this opportunity and for everything that you all do. You all have had some pretty rough years the last couple years. So thank you for that. Really appreciate that, both medically and personally and everything else. So thank you again. Oh, questions? There we go.
We do have time for a minute or two of questions, and then we also have a couple-minute break afterwards if folks want to speak with Diana right up front. So, questions from the audience?
And if you don't want to ask, I'm always happy, because it is still a topic we're sometimes nervous. I'm happy to answer on the side too. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
So I would estimate, and I'm Cindy Fishman. I'm from Children First Pediatrics. I'm a primary care pediatrician. In the thick of things. I don't want to use statistics because of all the people who deal with statistics all the time, but I would think 20 to 30% of our population has some disability. Okay.
Yep.
And my experience, I'm old, so I'm on the generational this side, but I feel like the kids coming up are very attuned to it.
Yep.
And they don't have the stigma attached. Is that something you're seeing?
Yes.
I mean,
so, I met with some of the children's team earlier today, and, the last couple of 3 years, mental health has been a huge topic, but neurodiversity has really kind of taken over in the last year. And we see that for 2 reasons. We have this younger demographic coming in the workplace. And as we say, we're out and proud about our disabilities, right? We're coming to work fully as ourselves. So we're talking about, our disability, whether it's autism, whether it's, mental health or whatnot. So we have that group coming in. And then we have this older generation in place that are getting diagnoses or are starting to slowly come out about it because they're seeing this younger generation, or they're sitting and saying, wait a minute, maybe these are a few things that I've been, because a lot of times we talk about, those invisible or non-apparent disabilities. And so it's like ADHD, it's not real, it's just, in their head or whatnot. Well, now we see this older demographic going to get tested and things like that. And wait a minute, that answers so many questions. Now I've what's been going on the last, I wish I knew 40 years ago because it would have changed my career. So yes, you're exactly right. So we see the older demographic, either finally talking about it or getting diagnoses. And then we have this younger generation that it's like, if you can't accept me for who I am, I'm out. And so it's helpful because that's also helping the older demographic, to be honest, kind of take that same, this is me. And I think the pandemics also do that. I have to take care of me, because if I don't take care of me, who's going to take care of me?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
If the workplace, I'm really loud. That might be my disability. If the workplace doesn't really get soon they're going to lose out.
Right.
Because I
And
mean,
that's
this whole group.
Yep. And that's why we have to have these conversations. And that's why, like, which I didn't do in the beginning, but I did it throughout. I'm coming out and proud. For years, I didn't talk about my general anxiety disorder because I was too afraid, right? And then I was like, well, what am I afraid of? Because if I'm having a rough day, especially with the pandemic, I want people to understand and know, hey, I may be off and this is why. But it's slow because a lot of this is something we didn't talk about. And then how do we accommodate people? How do we accept a disability when we can't see it? You know, we always like that visual proof, but if we can't see it, then how do we know it's real? And every person's need is different. So how do we even, you know, accommodate that person? So yes, the workplace is behind, but that we're having these conversations. Children's is a partner of disability. And so we're working on this with Children's, and it takes time. That's the other thing. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take years, whether it's an accommodation process you have, whether it's people you want to self-ID. Because again, I didn't even self-ID when I went into interviews. And clearly I have a disability and I was too afraid. What are you going to do with that information, right? You're going to hold that against me? Well, if we're not talking about what that information is for, too, we're not going to create that environment that is accepting in the workplace. So it's a slow change. It's happening. If you want to look at companies who are doing it, you know, who are like leaders, Microsoft, huge leader in the workplace. So we're really, Northrop Grumman, they started out with their self-ID campaign in 2014 with 1% of people self-identifying with a disability. Almost 10 years later, they have 10%. So it's taken them 10 years to increase 10%. And, you know, as much as we want to say that's great, it's not as fast as we want, but we're working on it. Long answer, sorry.
Thank you so much, Diana.